I'd already got myself into position, curled up in the corner with my shoulders pressed into the side of the car to give me leverage. At the same time, my legs shot out. Mr. Relic had made a bad mistake. With his hand underneath his jacket, he couldn't defend himself. Both my feet slammed into him, one on his shoulder, one just above his waist. I'd kicked him with all my strength, and as my legs uncoiled, he was thrown against the opposite door. The catch gave way. Mr. Relic didn't even have time to cry out. The door swung open, and he was thrown out into the night and the rain. My father must have speeded up without my noticing, because we were doing almost 60, and then it seemed that the wind plucked Mr. Relic away. He hit the road in a spinning, splattering somersault. And it was worse than that. Although I hadn't seen it, an articulated lorry had been coming the other way, doing about the same speed as us. Mr. Relic fell under its wheels. The lorry made mincemeat of him. My mother screamed. My father stopped the car. The articulated lorry stopped. Suddenly everything was silent apart from the rain hammering on the roof. My father twisted round and stared at me. The side door was still hanging open. "What?" he began. Quickly I explained. I told him everything. The name on the window, the lies Mr. Relic had told, the things he'd said to me, the blood on his hands, the knife. My mother was in total shock. Her face was white and she was crying quietly. My father waited until I had finished, and then he reached out and laid a hand on my arm. "It's all right, Jacob," he said. "Wait here." He got out of the car and walked up the road. I could see him out of the back window. The lorry driver had stopped on the hard shoulder, and the two of them met. There was no sign of Mr. Relic. He must have been spread out over a fair bit of the A12. It had been horrible what had happened. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd done what I had to do. I'd saved both my parents and myself. We should never have stopped. My father and the lorry driver talked for a few minutes. Then my father walked back to the car. The rain had eased off a little, but he was still soaking wet. "He's going to call the police," my father said. "We're nearly there, so I said we'd go on. He's going to give our details to the police." "Did you tell him what happened?" I asked. "Yes." My father got it back in behind the steering wheel. My mother was still crying. "He knows you did the right thing, Jacob. Don't worry. We're going to leave now." We drove for another 10 minutes, and then, just past the first sign for Woodbridge, we turned off down a narrow lane. It twisted through woodland for about a mile, and then we came to a high brick wall with spikes set along the top. We stopped in front of a pair of metal gates with an intercom system just in front. My father leant out of the car window and said something. The gates clicked and swung open automatically. I knew where we were. We'd come to Fairfields, the East Suffolk Maximum Security Hospital for the criminally insane. My father had to tell them what happened, of course. He'd agreed that with the lorry driver. This is where Mr. Relic had come from, and we just killed him in self-defence. They had to know. I asked my father if that's why we'd come here. "Yes, Jacob," he said, "that's why we're here." We drove towards a big Victorian house with towers and barred windows and blood-red bricks. I could see how the place had got its new name, though. It was surrounded by attractive gardens, the lawns spreading out for some distance beneath the high-voltage searchlights. Before we'd even stopped, the front door of the house had opened, and a bald, bearded man in a white coat came running out. "Wait here," my father said again. I waited with my mother while the two of them spoke, but this time I managed to hear a little of what they had said. My father did most of the talking. "You were wrong, Dr. Fairfield, you were wrong. We never should have taken him. None of us could have known he was doing so well. He was fine in Southwold, he was fine. I thought he was normal, but then this. I don't know what to say to you, Mr. Fisher, I don't. Never again, Dr. Fielding. For God's sake, never again. The two men came to the car. My father leant in. We're going with Dr. Fielding, he said. All right, I said. My mother didn't look up as I got out of the car. She didn't even say goodbye. That made me a little sad. Dr. Fielding put a hand on my shoulder. Let's go inside, Jacob, he said. We have to talk about what happened. All right, I said. Later on, they told me that the hitchhiker's name was Mr. Rennick and that I'd misheard him. Apparently, Mr. Rennick was a gardener who'd been working outside Lowestoft. His car had broken down and he'd managed to hitchhike as far as Southwold, which is where we'd picked him up. They told me that it was mud I'd seen on his wrist, not blood, and that they had scraped him off the tarmac. He'd been holding not a knife, but a cigarette case. That was what they told me, but I didn't believe any of it. After all, they also told me a lot of lies about my brother Eddie when he fell under a train. They even wanted me to believe that I'd pushed him. Nobody ever understood. So here I am back in my room looking out of the barred window at the same old view. I had such a nice day in Southwold. I just hope I won't have to wait another 9 years before they take me out again.